three different understandings of rhetoric. Number one, oratory and oral persuasion. I think this is where most people encounter rhetoric at the university level, is in our public speaking courses. That's why public speaking is a pretty important course. It's not introduction to rhetoric, but it should be. That's what it should be. There's an intro to biology class. There's intro to literature courses. There's history or Western civilization, which was the name that it had when I took it, when I was in university, which is an introduction to history. All of these other disciplines have an introduction to them. Intro to sociology, intro to psychology. We have public speaking. And the advantage there is that public speaking is a required course, but the disadvantage is it's not called anything, any of the terminology that we use. We don't use the term public speaking outside of that course. But it's still a great opportunity to introduce people to rhetoric in this traditional sense. Now, I don't just mean public speaking is communicating ideas that are formed somewhere else, but the idea of speech itself as something epistemic, as something that is knowledge, as something that is creating knowledge. Not in the Robert Scott rhetoric is epistemic sense, but in the sense that I don't really need to communicate deep thought happening somewhere else through words as public speaking. I can make speech my composition, and knowledge can come from the moment of delivery and sharing my ideas with the audience. This understanding needs to be forwarded. This is a very important understanding of rhetoric, and unfortunately we teach public speaking in a way where it's like business school, where we're just teaching how to give a presentation for a group of people, or how to talk to people who need their minds changed, or something like that. Not a big fan of that mode of public speaking. It should be taught more of a investigative mode, a method course, something like that. So that's understanding number one. Meaning number two. How do we negotiate what shared symbols mean in context? Now, this is the part of rhetoric that I think is the most popular among NCA rhetoricians, or the kind of rhetoricians the kind of tradition I was trained in, and the people I hang out with who might be commenting on this video tell me why I'm wrong. But this is the part that we would call rhetorical criticism, which is the most popular part of contemporary rhetorical studies at the university, which is taking some event, some symbol, some moment, and unpacking how it got the dominating meaning that it has, and how that meaning is negotiated, policed, and controlled. So, for example, something that has symbolic value can be reinterpreted if there's enough force in the audience or the rhetor to say, no, this is what this really means. Rhetorical critics can talk about either how that happens and transform the meaning of a symbol, or how the people who benefit from a particular interpretation of that symbol or a particular interpretation of that text, how do they benefit from patrolling and maintaining the borders of that interpretation? That's the second one. Now, this also extends into ideology. So this is a place where Marxists, neo-Marxists, and all of those kind of critics and thinkers in terms of Marxism, new historicism, new criticism can all talk about ideology. Ideology has been brought into rhetoric in a strange way, mostly through the work of Michael Calvin McGee, the ideograph. But ideology can be broadly thought of as a text that provides a default interpretation for most of the symbolic or contextual elements people will find in everyday life. That's something that rhetorical critics can study, and actually it's a very profitable and interesting way to study, is to say, how does that layer of ideology help us make a decision about what something means without even really thinking about it? So this part of rhetoric is extremely important, because this could be rhetoric's contribution to critical thinking. That is, attending to the ideological layer of hermeneutics that make interpretation easy, and in fact so easy you don't even think you're interpreting. What you think you're doing is figuring out what's real. And that's where rhetoric has a ton of power. Like Aristotle said, it's when it's not about itself, when it's invisible, when it's undetectable. Rhetoric is extraordinarily powerful because it looks like the truth. Rhetorician's goal is to unpack that and show how the mechanisms work, how all these things are possible, how these things are maintained and controlled with a lot of energy in order to make certain interpretations stick and become the dominant meanings in society, and then also how those dominant meanings might not be healthy for all the members of society, and also maybe how to resist them. I don't think rhetorical critics are that interested in that, but they definitely sow the seeds for theories of resistance in their work. So that's meaning number two. understanding of rhetoric number 3. This is probably my favorite one because it's my most favorite person in rhetoric, Kenneth Burke. Rhetoric as identification. Now, Burke is pulling from a lot of different traditions when he talks about rhetoric as identification. There's the Freudian element there of the idea of identification from Freud, but that's not the entire story. I really think that kind of gets overblown a bit. I think what Burke is saying with identification is that we are looking to this ideological layer, this layer of meaning that is out there in the world that we're kind of tossed into or brought into, or how we get our bearing in society. And we look to that for symbols that we can identify with that show us who we would like to be and who we'd like to present to others that we are. So we attract those symbols to ourselves. We dress in a certain way. We fix our hair in a certain way. We groom ourselves in a certain way. We wear certain symbols. And we talk and we say phrases that a lot of people might call cliche, but we could also call them tropes or commonplaces in the rhetorical tradition that indicate to audiences, i.e. other people around us, who we'd like them to think that we are, or even more precisely, who we wish we were or who we'd like to be. We communicate that through this all the time, and rhetoric is a practice of identification. That is, I am consubstantial is the word that Burke uses. I'm consubstantial with this thing. That is, I am right alongside it. I'm with it. I'm in it. I'm different. I'm an individual, but I'm with this thing in a way to where you can see us as kind of laid on top of each other or maybe intermeshed in a way, which I think is a very powerful way to think about it. Burke also talks about how any move to identify is simultaneously a move to divide. You can even think, as one scholar put it, I can't remember the name of this person, we should write identification/division as a phrase in our work, because there's really not a lot of space or difference there between those two things. An interesting idea, but nevertheless, that's how close they are. Whenever I'm identifying, I am unknowingly dividing, maybe knowingly dividing, but I'm unknowingly dividing from a number of other identifications that audiences might like or want to be close to. And I'm communicating to them, hey, this is what I am not. So through the process of identification, I'm also showing what I am not, which could be an incredibly persuasive, incredibly powerful way to show people what I'm about or what I'm not about. The trick here is that we can't really know all the different ways we can divide. The importance of identification division comes in Burke's idea of dramatism, which is that we should look at the entire world as theater. What we are seeing from people's actions is a question. What is their motive? We're asked to ascribe the motives of people all day, every day. And through identification division, we find the resources to put together an argument about what other people are about. Oh, they're doing this and this and this. This must be their motive. I know they're this kind of person, so my attitude is going to be this towards them. And that's how human interaction and meaning works. What Burke wants to do is show that you can reframe this by bringing certain terms to the foreground and pushing others to the background through the use of persuasive language. So instead of talking about what they're doing, you could talk about how they're doing it, when they're doing it, under what conditions they do it. And that's how we have arguments about whether or not the attitude we have towards somebody is appropriate or not. This is obvious in big politics, but it can also be in the everyday or in community activism or anything like that. One can reframe the attitudes one's audience has about a particular person or a particular moment or a particular symbol by moving certain terms into the foreground and saying, yeah, I get how you have that attitude, but let's look at the motives in terms of this situation or what they were trying to do or how they did it. That makes identification one of the most powerful rhetorical tools, not just for understanding the world, but for changing it. This is the next level of oratorical persuasion and advocacy, is to adopt the ideas of Kenneth Burke in your discourse. So that's the very quick version of the 3 ways that I think rhetoric is understood at the university. Please leave a comment down below, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, and let me know what other things about rhetoric you'd like me to cover on this channel, and I will do it. Or I'll try to do it, and then you can tell me if I did a good job or not.